China are bad, Russia are bad, Trump is bad. The line between good and bad is a clear one. On one side, you've got Trump and Russia and all of that. On the other side, you've got the Biden administration and the Democrats. So why are they selling more weapons to corrupt autocratic regimes than ever before in history? Because wouldn't that be bad? No, it's got to be good. How do we make sense of all this? Hello there, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us on this voyage to truth and freedom. Look within yourself. The power you require is there. Turn on the notification bell right now. We make this content every day. The algorithm will direct you towards propaganda. We together can move towards enlightenment, personal and collective awakening, simply by identifying the fact that we're being lied to. What I mean by lied to is we're being told that we're on the side of peace and security, that the current most powerful government in the world, the Democratic Party of Joe Biden, are guiding us towards a more peaceful world, making Saudi Arabia a pariah.
The pariah that they are.
Trying their best to end war and bring about peace. But does that make sense when the business of America, corporate America, is selling weapons around the world? This isn't just Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, etc. The American government is directly, explicitly, hands-on involved, sometimes in the literal transportation of missiles and weapons around the world. You're not going to believe this story. Well, you will, because you already knew the world was corrupt. You told us after all. But you're going to be surprised at just how hypocritical and disgusting it is.
In the battle between democracy and autocracies, democracies are rising to the moment, and the world is clearly choosing the side of peace and security.
Do you know the way that they talk to you is reductive, simplifying, and often downright untrue? I would say this qualifies as actual propaganda. He's telling you that there's a battle between good and evil. He's referring, of course, to the war between Ukraine and Russia, an autocracy versus a democracy, but you don't have to read much about Ukraine for very long at all to recognize that their politics has been quite complicated, even in recent history, and you don't have to look at American democracy for very long to see that it's actually been entirely co-opted by corporate interests, and primarily the military-industrial complex, whom he is advocating for, even while he's telling you that he's operating on behalf of democracy. It's not simple, is it? You know already that the line between good and evil runs not between nations, states, or races, but through every human heart. Who said that? Solzhenitsyn, who I believe was from Russia.
This is the real test, and it's going to take time.
It's going to take time. Let us continue to sell weapons. The function of this speech is to say, we are going to continue to sell weapons around the world. We are going to prolong this conflict between Ukraine and Russia, even though China are trying to advocate and indeed broker a peace deal, which if America and China came together and said, come on, we're the big boys of global politics, why don't we bring about peaceful... They're not going to do that because, well, we're going to explain to you in a minute just how dependent and involved they are with arms sales. It's integral to their model. Once you know that, when you watch this, it's like perhaps the first time you do hallucinogens. Not that I'm endorsing such a thing. Everything suddenly makes sense. You can understand, oh, of course, they say that for this reason. Let me know in the chat and comments when you awaken to how things really work.
I think we're in a contest, not with China per se,
but actually China literally to be the one true power in the world that's in control of everything. That is actually, I suppose, the macro geopolitical argument. Let me know if you agree in the chat. China are an ascendant force. China appear to have their own diplomatic ways of dealing with commerce and world trade, setting up deals in parts of Africa, setting up relationships in places in the Middle East. And America are a long established imperial power, and they are being challenged, and they're trying to prevent that from happening. So in a way, the use of the word per se was just a lie. And I think if anyone says per se, it's probably a lie. I mean, who says per se anyway? It's a stupid thing, per se. I think when people say per se, they're always lying.
Yes, Your Honor, on the evening in question, per se, Your Honor.
but a context with autocrats, autocratic governments around the world, as whether or not democracies can compete with them in the rapidly changing 21st century. And I think how we act and whether we pull together as democracies is going to determined.
Just how he starts stroking his chin. In our country, the UK, that used to be a sign of you're telling a lie. I don't know what it means in body language. But did you notice he said democracies are going to have to pull together around the world. And that's not a globalist cadre coming together to impose a kind of new world order. Oh, new world order is a conspiracy. Is it when you disempower sovereign nations, where you take edicts offered from above by undemocratic organisations? Is that a conspiracy? When at the G7, the President of the United States said we're going to have to pull together against autocracies, essentially the baddies, essentially that means people that aren't doing things the way we want to, people that we can sell weapons to the enemies of. How do I make this sound like not a lie, per se?
Whether our grandkids look back 15 years from now and say, did they step up? Are democracies as relevant and as powerful as they have been?
Don't pretend that we're doing this for our grandchildren who might be annihilated in a nuclear war because of this irresponsible program to arm the world with weapons of every variety. One thing I will tell you, grandkids, invest in Northrop Grumman. Business is booming. So let's have a look at it in more detail. Since President Joe Biden came into office in 2021, he has described a battle between democracies and autocracies in which the US and other democracies strive to create a peaceful world. The reality, however, is that the Biden administration has helped increase the military power of a large number of authoritarian countries. So he's saying one thing, but he's actually making it worse. We've got to do something about all these armed countries. Well, here's a suggestion. Stop selling them fucking weapons. Oh, yeah, but we didn't sell them per se. According to an Intercept review of recently released government data, the US sold weapons to at least 57% of the world's autocratic countries in 2022. So how bad do they think they are? If you think a country's bad and dangerous, maybe don't sell it weapons? I don't know. Let me know in the chat. Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has been the world's biggest weapons dealer. So, like, when you're looking at why have these countries got weapons, what's making them so dangerous, what's making them so difficult to oppose? Well, it's the fact that they're heavily armed and militarily capable. How did they become militarily capable? We made them militarily capable through the sale of weapons that are required to sustain our economy. Either tell people that or shut up, but don't sort of sell them the weapons and go, oh no, what are we going to do about these countries? They've got weapons.
Iraq, incredible weapons. Incredible weapons. How do you know that? We looked at the receipt.
So are you, like me, curious about how these weapon sales actually happen? Is it like that they go over there and do conferences or put on presentations, or are the US government directly involved in weapon sales? The answer is they're directly involved. Listen to how it actually works. In general, these exports are funded through grants or sales. There are two pathways for the latter category: foreign military sales and direct commercial sales. The US government acts as an intermediary for FMS, foreign military sales acquisitions. It buys the material from a company first and then delivers the goods to the foreign recipient. So it's actually doing sort of like, did anybody say Just Eat? They're like, Deliveroo, Uber deliveries, but for weapons. Where the hell are my missiles, for God's sake? Oh, they'll be here in a minute. Direct commercial sales acquisitions are more straightforward. They're the result of an agreement between a US company and a foreign government. Both categories of sales require the government's approval. So if they truly wanted to impede the abilities of these terrible autocracies to wreak havoc on the world and their own populations, oh no, not another humanitarian crisis, they could not deliver the weapons like an explosive uranium pizza. A total of 142 countries and territories bought weapons from the US in 2022 for a total of $85 billion in bilateral sales. Of the 84 countries codified as autocracies under the regimes of the world system in 2022, the United States sold weapons to at least 48 or 57% of them. The at least qualifier is necessary because several factors frustrate the accurate tracking of US weapons sales. The State Department's report of commercial arms sales during the fiscal year makes prodigious use of various in its recipients categories. As a result, the specific recipients for nearly $11 billion in weapon sales are not disclosed. We sold weapons to various people. Were any of them autocracies? I don't know. Does an autocracy fit under the word various? Yeah, I suppose it does. Well, there's your answer then. And would there be any reason why you didn't specifically say who you'd sold weapons to, as you have done in the other cases? You can work that out for yourselves. Maybe with your little grandchildren. Such a ad hoc way of doing it. Like when you have to do your own tax returns, oh, it's various. They're at your door, aren't they? Like the second you don't do everything by the book, or you don't park in the right place, you don't click every time you use Google, I accept, send me cookie. They're like selling weapons irresponsibly. Oh, we may or may not have sold some weapons. Like they're poets or something. I can't keep track of all of my weapons sales. I'm a genius. No, don't bother them. Don't bother them. When they're selling weapons, it's just like jazz. But have those helicopters. Kill Colonel Gaddafi if he gets out of control. These findings contradict Biden's preferred framing of international politics as fundamentally a struggle in which the world's democracies, led by the United States, are on the side of peace and security. Yeah, contradict it because it's a lie and it's untrue, and if you include facts in the analysis or framing, that you can't keep that. We are here to keep peace and security for democracies around the world. If you're doing that, why do you keep selling weapons to countries that by your own reckoning are bad? Could we have a question that I've been given in advance, please? Because that's fucking confusing. Opposing the United States and its democratic allies are the autocracies that collude to undermine the international system, Biden has stated. Who's really doing this colluding though? Is it those damned autocracies? Or is there real collusion between the military-industrial complex and the government who are selling and delivering and signing off arms sales to countries that by their own reckoning and analysis are a threat? Where's the real collusion? These goddamn autocracies clubbing together all their money to buy some weapons and missiles from me. I like those autocracies. In a speech in Warsaw last year, he said the battle between democracy and autocracy is one between liberty and repression. And they always try to simplify everything. We are liberty, they are repression. They are the customer, you are the sales clerk. And between a rules-based international order and one governed by brute force. They use deep archetypal languages and images that belie the inability of the dominant state to own its own bad side or dark side or shadow. Instead of saying we have brutality within us, that's why there are all these unnecessary wars and lies that lead to wars and profitable wars and unnecessary wars and illegal wars and ongoing perpetual botched wars. Instead of saying that, they have to go, there's these baddies and we have to control them somehow. Firstly by selling them weapons and then by going to war with them to make sure they don't misuse those weapons. It's a brilliant system, really. The White House's 2022 national security strategy adds the most pressing strategic challenge facing our vision is from powers that layer authoritarian governance with a revisionist foreign policy. What's being revised is what the words liberty and repression mean, because liberty is meant to mean leave people alone and repression means controlling things, like all the censorship and surveillance and control of information. Stand up on the stage claiming that you care about your grandchildren when your policies are designed to arm the world in order to maintain the profitability of the military-industrial complex. Isn't that the problem? I don't know. Do you tell me? Despite that rhetoric, a review of the new data suggests instead a business-as-usual approach to weapons sales, which, by the way, is the wrong way. Oh, well, business as usual. Weapons for everyone. Should we be doing this? Former President Donald Trump based his arms sale policy primarily on economic considerations, corporate interests above all else. In his first foreign trip as president, he travelled to Saudi Arabia and announced a major arms deal with the repressive kingdom. Trump's business-first approach resulted in a dramatic upturn in weapons sales during his administration. So there you go, that's what Trump was doing. Why are them all scratching their heads about, well, why do people like Donald Trump? Russia must have somehow been involved, even though we know they definitely weren't. When it's appealing to have someone go, gotta go to Saudi Arabia, business first, gotta sell them weapons. At least you go, oh, all right, thanks. I mean, it's still bad, it's still wrong, it's still not ideal, is it? But the alternative to that is not, well, we're not going to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. The alternative is we're going to say that we're not going to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, then sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, then claim that we're the goodies and we're part of the solution and Saudi Arabia and other countries are bad and we're protecting you.
Are we the baddies?
Can you not see how that's less appealing than someone going, it's just business, we've just got to do that? In Biden's first fiscal year as president, weapons sales from the United States to other countries reached $206 billion. Biden's first year total surpasses the Trump-era high of $192 billion. This should trouble you, because these are actual numbers, right? And numbers don't lie. Donald Trump, $192 billion, while saying, yeah, it's business as usual, we've got to do it. Biden, oh, they're a pariah, we're never going to do it. In the first fiscal year, exceeded what Trump had done, while telling you that we're much better, we're much kinder, much more progressive, much more on top of it. How can that be your ideology? How can that be the mountain upon which you stand condemning, oh, these MAGA voters, they're idiots, they're racist idiots. No, what they are is they've intuited and understood that you're lying and that the only difference is a kind of vanity around discourse. Hey, why aren't you doing the lying that we do and pretending to care about poor people while actually selling more weapons than the guy that we hate because he's so bad and violent? Imagine the orgy of foaming, orgasmic fluid that would be expended if they were able to go, Trump sold so many more, we've curtailed it, we've reduced the weapons. They can't say that because it's simply not true. Empty, pious rhetoric. Remember, I do not think that the Republican Party or Donald Trump or any of that is any better. I'm not like, and that's why you should all vote for Donald Trump. That's not my argument. Don't do that either. Don't do that either. But definitely don't trust these idiots. The multi-billion-dollar effort to train and equip Ukraine doesn't fully explain the dramatic rise in total arms sales last year, let alone to autocracies. Russia's invasion of Ukraine didn't occur until 5 months into fiscal year 2022. Even without the Ukrainian war, we were doing great. But add to that a war that could be peacefully resolved, and you've got a real business opportunity. Rather, the new figures reveal the continuity between Republican and Democratic administrations. While Biden signaled early on that his arms sale policy would be based primarily on strategic and human rights considerations, not just economic interests, Trump's like, it's business, Biden. Well, we're going to be governed by human rights and mostly grandchildren. I'm just going to be going to Saudi Arabia with one thing on my mind. Grandchildren. Grandchildren. How many missiles do you want? I'll sell you more than Donald Trump for my grandchildren. He's already made sure his kids are all right, evidently. Allegedly. Now he's moving on to the grandchildren. He broke from that policy not too long after entering office by approving weapons sales to Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and other authoritarian regimes. But it's not just selling arms to countries that you said you wouldn't, pretending that you're better than Trump when in fact you're worse than Trump by the metric that you consider to represent those ideas of good and bad. It's also providing military personnel. It's no use just giving them a bunch of weapons if they haven't got military personnel that know how to strategically use them. Let's make sure there's a revolving door between the Pentagon and these autocratic countries to ensure these weapons are used expediently. More than 500 retired US military personnel, including scores of generals and admirals, have taken lucrative jobs since 2015 working for foreign governments, mostly in countries known for human rights abuses and political repression. Hey, I got a new job in Saudi Arabia. I've heard of that country. Why is that? Oh, probably because of human rights abuses and repression. Oh, yeah, what job are you going to be doing? Some sort of charity thing or some sort of communication job to help? Listen, I'm going to stop you. I'm there helping them to fire missiles correctly. Oh, well done, grandchildren. Most of the retired US personnel have worked as civilian contractors for Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other Persian Gulf monarchies, playing a critical, though largely invisible, role in upgrading their militaries. That's interesting. Wait a minute, who fired that missile so brilliantly? All the while, the Gulf countries' security forces have continued to commit human rights abuses at home and beyond their borders. You might think, what business is it of the government? This is free market economics. Actually, there is some regulation there to ensure that highly trained military personnel don't go and work for potential enemies. So they have to be signed off and approved by the government. So they're probably quite circumspect. Wait a minute, that's an autocratic place. Wait a minute, they're potential enemies. Wait a minute, it's our job to ensure democracy wins. So no. At least what? 70% of the time? 80% of the time? They're vetoing it? Of the more than 500 requests submitted since 2015, about 95% were granted. To keep the wheels turning of this military-industrial complex machine, you need lobbyists that know where the sweet spot are when lobbying the government. Let's see how that part of this operation works. At least 672 former government officials, military officers, and members of Congress worked as lobbyists, board members, or executives for the top 20 defense companies in 2022, according to a new report. From 2011 through 2022, more than 3/4 of defense sector lobbyists previously worked in the federal government. These lobbyists leveraged their relationships and expertise on a range of issues, including the annual defense spending bill. So 3/4 of defense lobbyists had previously been in the government. There's hardly time for them to finish that job before they've been in that job. Might as well do it with your own hands. Oh, I've got some lovely new missiles available. Wouldn't it be wrong for me to buy missiles from you? Well, I am just you, really, and it's going to be good. I'll keep the wheels greased. Okay, I'll take those missiles. Make sure they don't end up in an autocratic government's hands. Well, actually, we was going to recommend that they do. Oh, okay then, given that we're actually part of the same thing. Yes, think about it, you know. Sorry, I've been doing this too long. I'm starting to forget who I actually am. And that's what's gone wrong. So there you have it. The military-industrial complex deserves its name, for surely it is in many ways complex. A set of interrelated relationships that enable a system to continue without ever confronting its immorality. That it's wrong to say that these are autocratic countries that thrive on repression and then sell them weapons. That it's wrong to have people that have worked for the military country now working abroad for those countries, that it's wrong to have people that previously worked in government now lobbying, presumably for relaxed and amenable conditions for them to continue doing stuff like selling weapons to autocratic countries. But the system requires it. The system cannot ever stop itself from doing that. That is what the system is. So unless you have political figures that say, we will end these systems, we will change them, and then they do that stuff, what you've got is just more of the same, and you're basically saying, oh, I like the way that one talks a bit more, and this one makes me feel better about myself, either because they help me to express my repressed anger, or because they help me to feel superior socially. It'll be one of those things. It will just be some emotional tick that we've acquired through our conditioning, and who can blame us, because we've been bombarded with propaganda our whole lives. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Turn on the notification bell. We make this content every day. YouTube will conceal it. We will reveal it. That's the truth, baby. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these and watch us on Rumble every single day at these times. Until then, though, and more important than that, stay free.